Well, good afternoon, everybody. And to Chris, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Small technical hitch with a Rex aeroplane this morning. Lucky for me, the technical hitch was on the ground, not in the air. And I'm very lucky to be here. Can I also recognise Michael Daly, the Shadow Minister for Planning, who's also here, and a number of my former colleagues who I believe are here as well, in particular Peter Seaton and I think maybe Patricia Forsyth. BOOMTOWN, well, that's us. We are the envy of the world. We are a global sweet spot when it comes to infrastructure and infrastructure investment. And at the same time, we're seeing enormous outcomes for our community right across the board. A $73 billion program over the next 4 years. Over $40 billion of that in public transport and roads right across New South Wales, not just here in metropolitan Sydney. And without doubt, and I think one of this is the key points in relation to this is a program that hasn't happened by accident. It's important that people understand that it's not the new norm to see this degree of infrastructure investment in our state. We have the largest urban road and rail project underway at the same time. We have, of course, North Connects, West Connects, International Convention Centre. We have 3 light rail projects on the go in this state, and of course we're going to complete the first stage of the new metro train in the first half of 2019. We're going to have the tunnel boring machines for the stage 2 of the metro, which will in essence go under the harbour, under the city, out to Sydenham, and then we'll metrify the line out to Bankstown. We'll have that work complete by 23-24 with those boring machines back in the ground in 2018. And very pleasingly, only a couple of weeks ago, I stood with the Premier at Sydney Olympic Park, where Mike and I announced the next stage of the metro, that being Metro West. Can I also, in doing so this morning, recognise the work that Mike has done? Mike Baird was the politician, the leader, who established the Recycling Initiative to take funds from lazy assets on the balance sheet to bring forward the cash flow, raise the capital to invest into an infrastructure fund which is about delivering productive infrastructure right across the state. Yes, we get the benefit of the private sector management of those assets. But more importantly, we're doing this not to pay down debt, not to pay public sector wages, but most importantly to invest in this world-leading infrastructure program. I can assure you all, having travelled around Asia earlier this year, the interest, particularly in Western Sydney, is very real and very profound. People love our economy. They love what we're doing. They can see that we are about improving the quality of life for our citizens and driving fantastic economic and social outcomes at the same time. And it's Mike's leadership which led to that recycling of capital initiative, which enabled us to obviously press the case and secure the transactions for the poles and wires, which is now going to free up even more capital. I can assure you that between myself, the Premier, the Planning Minister Rob Stokes, Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian in the next 12 months, we're going to take the infrastructure program to a new level as we're able to revisit even more of it, the infrastructure aspirations of this state off the back of the poles and wires transaction, with the first 2 transactions being incredibly successful and the third transaction to commence in the next 12 months. We have that opportunity, and it's one which you all need to be part of, providing that advice, that support, that commitment to this incredible state. In terms of Metro West, it's a project which, without doubt, has to be built. If you consider the T1 train line from the west, from Richmond, from Emu Plains into the city, every morning commuters are crushed on those trains. It's time for us to build greater capacity into the rail network to Sydney's west with a metro train. If you consider that by 2031 it'll be near impossible to get a commuter onto a train on that train line, given the growth that we're experiencing across Western Sydney, we have no option but to build and double the capacity in terms of passenger rail between the city and Parramatta. It makes sense. It frees up capacity on the existing line. It opens up opportunities in terms of the new Western Sydney Airport, and it's one which I think gives us even greater capacity to improve the connection between Parramatta and the CBD, and we do have an aspiration in terms of trying to ensure that we can deliver train travel between the two cities at a pace that's never been experienced before. When the government made the announcement, we stipulated that we were going to put stops at Parramatta, Sydney Olympic Park, the Bays Precinct, and here in the CBD. One of the key things that I will be looking for as Minister as we engage with industry over the next 12 months in relation to this project is, I guess, two things. First of all, I want to be able to see how we can design it to run express services directly from Parramatta to the CBD. Try and get that train travel down below 20 minutes. And then, of course, and most importantly, we want to engage with industry and investors in terms of the location of stops along the way. And that's important because that comes to the heart of what today is about in terms of value sharing. We've seen the application of value sharing due to the leadership of people such as Chris Brown and others in terms of Parramatta Light Rail. We were able to advance the project, bring it forward, get this state thinking differently and innovatively about how we might finance infrastructure. If we want to truly create a virtuous cycle of infrastructure investment, not only is it underpinned by the taxpayer and, of course, any input from Canberra, but we must look at value sharing / value capture as a mechanism. It's done around the world. What we've seen here in Sydney in recent times in terms of the infrastructure investment that the government has made is enormous uplift in terms of property values and the returns to investors off the back of infrastructure being delivered within communities. Now, of course, that's against a backdrop where, in some cases, such as the Northwest, they waited generations for the metro train to be delivered. So when it comes to a debate about value sharing, you have to be mindful that those are in the community who for many years have waited for infrastructure, who deserve it. And then, of course, you also need to weigh it up against the application and means of funding it. Value sharing is one mechanism of many to fund infrastructure. But I think it's only fair if we see investors and developers make enormous net gains off the back of infrastructure that is delivered by government, by taxpayer. Then it's only fair, should those investors be very keen to see more infrastructure built, make a contribution. I'm talking about the net gain, talking purely in the terms of the net gain. We've seen it applied elsewhere around the world. Crossrail, where 60% of Crossrail in the UK is funded by Londoners. It's not the mums and dads' households who are funding it or the small business owner, but it's large businesses and, of course, also developers and investors who are going to see the enormous benefit of that infrastructure being delivered. Here in Sydney, we have seen some enormous changes in property values in and around particularly the Northwest. We've seen people come together and, bring together their properties and then on sell. I guess the point that I would make is that by sharing in the value, we're able to expedite the infrastructure, bring it forward in some cases by many years, then at the same time making sure that those who've waited generations are able to see that infrastructure developed. Integrated land use planning is something which is very important. We've got to flip transport planning on its head in this state. I've constantly said that planning should be a great customer of transport. We want to see, and we have seen, unfortunately, examples in this city, such as Green Square, the east side of Green Square in particular, where there was no mass transit solution provided, yet we've now delivered one of the highest concentrations of apartment dwellings in the nation. We can't repeat those mistakes. Which is why, with the advent of the Greater Sydney Commission, the district plans, which are in draft form, and the long-term transport master plan, which is being developed concurrently, we are able to better meet the needs, I think, in terms of community outcomes by getting the planning right. There's no doubt with the Western or the Metro West, we are going to see opportunities to fund it through value sharing. There's any number of mechanisms that can be deployed. In the case of Parramatta Light Rail, we're using a special infrastructure contribution to be able to do that. That's nothing new. We've seen 6 in this city being used over many years, but for the first time, we're now using it to partially fund a major transport project. My sense out of this is that value capture or value sharing is something which will work incredibly well alongside metro stops and, of course, also light rail. I'm unsure about its application further afield, and I think certainly as we dip our toe in the water in relation to Parramatta Light Rail, we are going to need to ensure we have the discipline to work with the investment community in its application. There's any number of mechanisms that can be deployed. We've seen throughout Asia, land and transport agencies merge, and in essence those transport agencies become developers. They land bank, they change the density, and then they build, and then on-sell. So for us, there is a number of mechanisms that can be deployed. My point, though, in relation to it, is that there's got to be good engagement up front, and at the same time we must ensure that we embed it in the business case when we go to develop and plan for the piece of infrastructure. It's key. The Metro is an incredible piece of infrastructure. I don't think anybody will realise how critical it is to this city till we start to see the advent of it in 2019. It's a driverless train, fully automated, 3 doors, can move 45,000 passengers per hour compared to the existing heavy rail network which moves 24,000 passengers per hour. So its ability to deliver a mass transit solution when you see the opportunities that are presented between here and Parramatta in terms of the corridor is incredible. It's a turn up and go service. It's one without a timetable. And it comes at a time when transport is transforming into a technology business. I've made it clear through my own agency, it's all about technology. We have to move away, and I've did some forward thinking. I want to see the abolition of timetables. On-demand services. Next year we're going to trial our first on-demand bus service here in Sydney. The advent of the autonomous vehicle, again, is going to change transport planning and the thinking around infrastructure investment. And of course, as we do this, we have far greater access to data than we ever have before with the advent of electronic ticketing through the Opal card system. So we are going to see enormous change in the next 10 years. We'll see driverless cars on our road, we'll see driverless trains moving people in and around the city. And our precincts will change. And the value to live within those precincts will change dramatically as well. I know that one question that might be in people's mind is, well, how does Parramatta Light Rail now interface with the announcement in relation to Metro West? We're going to work through this over the next 6 to 12 months. But they are 2 very different transport projects. Parramatta Light Rail is about connectivity between a number of precincts: Westmead, North Parramatta, Parramatta CBD, Carlingford, Camellia, Sydney Olympic Park, Strathfield. Whereas the Metro is designed for the purposes of mass transit to benefit millions of people as they commute every day. There's an enormous opportunity ahead. The infrastructure program has not happened by accident. We've got to maintain discipline in terms of the state's finances. We've got to continue to have the discipline when it comes to assurance. As Infrastructure Minister, I chair Cabinet Infrastructure Committee. We have oversight of some 600 projects worth more than $10 million being built in this state at this time. We have a strong reliance and partnership with the private sector to deliver. But what we have set about is to make sure that assurance and governance, particularly in the time that I've been Minister, is about delivery. And by delivering, we feed greater success, we feed greater interest from around the world, and more people have a real interest in what we're seeking to achieve. In closing, can I just say, Mike Baird and his team in 2017 will take this to a different level. We've never seen this before. We've never seen this degree of infrastructure investment in our state's history as what's happening right now. The community is sensing it, but it's important that we continue to sell the message, and it's one which I know that this government will continue the discipline to deliver in the many years ahead. Thank you.
Just briefly, because the trip from Bega, so shuffle the program a little bit, trying to catch up some time. But before we hand over to the panel, that Andrew Clennell from the Telegraph's going to rev up a bunch of industry to respond to the concept of value capture and the opposition. But Andrew, as Minister, as you know, it's a line I love and you love, which is in Western Sydney, we're happy to pay to play. And as demonstrated by the light rail, as will be demonstrated by Metro Rail or any other project that comes forth, Warragamba Dam, you name it, we'll find a way to put a bit of value sharing around it. We call it value capture, you call it value sharing. I think the Urban Task Force call it value theft. There's many different views around value at the moment. But with value sharing, there's a flip side to that, which is power sharing. If this room and others are going to start paying for the transport and other infrastructure we have, how do you, in some ways, synthesise a greater say in the light rail, how often it'll run, where it'll run, when it'll run? How do you, in government, make that transition to true cultural change towards value sharing?
Well, first of all, Jeff Lee, I apologise for not recognising you, the Liberal member for Parramatta, the man who has everything. I can say that coming from Bega. But, you know, the point in relation to all of this is that it's about upfront engagement. I think one of the things that we've done well with our industry engagement is we've done it early. And if you look at the metro projects, look at the light rail projects, there has been that upfront industry engagement. I think that makes it easier when you want to discuss financing of projects and, of course, design of projects. As long as the appropriate probity and process is in place and everybody understands that, there's no problems. I'm actually very excited about the ability to look at innovative ways to fund the Metro West, because it's not only about sharing in the value and the uplift, but ultimately it's about providing that quality of life for tens of thousands of Sydney-siders. So, look, we're not talking in terms of taxes and things like that. This is purely about the net gain, the net profit, the value uplift, and how you might share in that. If you consider Macquarie Park, where we saw, obviously, the rail link put in, and the economic uplift associated with Macquarie Park over a 10-year period was it doubled. So to that end, you know, I think with these game-changing projects, everyone is set to benefit. The overall value of the state has increased dramatically, even in the last 12 months. And I think that's the type of discipline we should take the approach. And, you know, I made a quip about Bega. This does assist taxpayers. I mean, if you look at the challenges besetting state finances around the nation, particularly over the next 10 years, particularly when it comes to healthcare spend. I mean, this government's taken the health budget from $15 billion to $20 billion in 5 years. There's enormous pressure on. And, you know, I'm passionate about seeing a virtuous cycle of infrastructure investment. I don't want to see politics getting in the way of it. I don't think that's the way to go. I think we have an independent advisory function through INSW and ultimately also the assurance and governance arrangements. Now, the reason I say that is if we can remove the politics, get to a virtuous cycle of infrastructure investment and get that co-contribution happening, then it enables us with greater capacity to deal with some of the other service challenges that exist across the board. So it's, to my way of thinking, this is an absolute must. It's one which we must have a debate about. I know Canberra's been devising discussion papers, but ultimately what we've got to be careful of is we don't see local government, state government, and where possible the federal government starting to apply value capture without any coordination, which comes back to my point. Any value sharing that must be embedded in the business case development for the infrastructure so that everybody understands where people stand. And that's the important.